Good morning. This is John Dingfelder and WMNF. You're listening to Down and Dirty on this beautiful Friday morning. Good morning, Jason Marlowe.
Good morning, John. How you doing today?
I'm good. Kick them when they're up, kick them when they're down. Bring us dirty laundry. We have the perfect guest to bring us dirty laundry.
Well, I imagine technically your best guest to bring you dirty laundry would be a maid or someone who's in your house who has access to your dirty laundry. But outside of that person.
There you go. We have Janelle Irwin Taylor, who's currently with Florida Politics and also, I think, Southeast Politics.
Yes.
Good morning, Janelle Irwin Taylor.
Good morning. I have plenty of dirty laundry at my house if you'd like me to bring it by.
I mean, technically, this is what we do. So, yes, feel
laundry?
free.
You do laundry?
Yeah, it's a 45-minute drive, as you mentioned earlier.
The
but
children
feel free.
are getting older. Don't they do their own laundry?
My kids have always done their own laundry.
There you go.
Since they were like 6.
Good for you.
It's resilience.
Good for you.
Life skills.
Janelle is no stranger to these microphones, but we're going to get into that in a few minutes. But Janelle Irwin Taylor, how are you this morning?
I'm fantastic. A little hungry. I haven't had breakfast yet.
You traversed the bay, but you said you had to get up for something even earlier.
Yeah, I was speaking at Cafe Con Tampa.
Oh.
So anybody who was there, hi again.
Bill Carlson and his gang.
Bill was actually not there.
Oh, that's funny. I could never make Cafe Con Tampa. I think I went one time. Because it's just too early. Especially
it's
on
8 in the morning. You're
Friday on a Friday morning. I do not want to get up at 7, and look decent.
I am usually up at 5:30 and on my bike for a bike ride by 6:45. So I am a morning person.
Yeah,
I am obnoxious.
Person.
People hate me.
Same.
It's
People
okay.
hate me too. It's okay.
I think
join me.
I think you're in the norm. Lynn and I are typically up till midnight every night, and we like to sleep in. Especially
really? You're up till midnight?
I turn into a pumpkin at like 9:30.
This is some dirty laundry.
And I'm the oldest one in the room. Janelle, a little bit about yourself. A lot of people have heard you on the air and read you over the years, many things that you've done, but, where'd you grow up? Who are you?
Yeah, so some of you might remember me from my WMNF roots way back when. I was actually the staff reporter here for several years, up until 2014.
Mm-hmm. Almost 3 years, I think.
Yeah, and I was a volunteer before that. And then after I left, I stayed on as a volunteer and continued to host a show. I had a couple of off stints because I had jobs that didn't allow me to do shows.
Sure.
But on and off until 2021, I had a show here. So I am definitely no stranger to.
That's awesome.
The microphones are new, though. I'm glad to see that.
They definitely are new and improved.
St. Pete, born and raised. My whole career has circulated around politics.
Why? What got you interested and excited about politics, and how early?
So I don't remember exactly how old I was, but when I was a little girl, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe, I don't know. My mom took me with her to vote.
There you go.
And we get there, and she pulls out of her pocket or her purse or whatever, I don't remember the details, a folded up cutout from what was then the St. Petersburg Times of all of their voting recommendations.
Sure.
And she just voted for what the newspaper told her to vote for. And I remember being like, well,
so she was a good Democrat.
She's not anymore.
Oh boy, okay.
But different strokes for different folks. I try not to, I've got to
have her.
We love you,
Mom. We love you.
Yeah, exactly. I love her very much. So she, I remember asking her something like, well, Mom, like, what if you don't agree with them? And she's like, well, I usually do. And it just struck me as odd, like, do your own research, sheeple. And so I kind of just decided that I wanted to be informed, and I thought it would be really cool to teach people, to educate people on issues that affected them. Like local government is so important. And, I said this at Cafe Con Tampa this morning, when the federal government shuts down, which it looks like it's probably going to here at the end of the day. Most people don't notice that. Obviously, if you're a furloughed worker because of it, you do. But if you have a trip planned to a national park, you're going to notice that. But if the local government shuts down, your trash is affected, your water is affected. Like, that's a big deal. And people don't realize that. So I thought, journalism was really this opportunity to give me a megaphone to make sure that people had access to the information they needed to make decisions that positively impacted their life. And I never looked back until after I had already been a journalist for like 12 years.
That's so cool. My 10 years on Tampa City Council, I always told people the same thing. I said, your local government affects your day-to-day much more.
Yeah.
And even when I was teaching middle school, and I'd say, what does your local government do? Who is your mayor? That sort of thing. I'd say, when you flush that toilet, why do you think it works?
Exactly. People forget.
Yeah, and people need to remember that, especially, like you said, when they go to vote.
Yeah. So many people vote against their own self-interest. It's mind-boggling.
Well, I think to your point, how about how newspapers, which maybe a generation ago actually had a real influence over the way people voted, people taking their newspapers, as you mentioned, into the ballot box with them for recommendations. I feel like those days are sort of gone.
Yeah, you think there's still a group of people doing that?
Absolutely. There are still people who put a lot of weight. I mean, people wouldn't have gotten so mad at the Washington Post for not endorsing in the presidential election if people didn't still pay attention to that, right? Like if that was just crickets, nobody would care that was a thing that happened. But to your point, Jason, there is this sense that the media can't be trusted, and that transcends partisanship, whether you're on the left or the political left or the political right. There's a lot of people who think that if they're hearing something on the news, it might not necessarily be true. But then on the converse to that, there's people who take everything they hear on whatever news they choose to listen to or read as, absolute fact.
Gospel,
and that creates an even bigger problem, because you have people who exist in these little silos and they listen to, One American News or Newsmax or whatever, or if you're on the left, the MSNBC or whatever. And if you're not diversifying your sources of information, you're not getting the full picture, and you're not really doing anybody else any favors.
Isn't that part of the problem, though, when we talk about the diminishing nature of local papers? You talk about how all politics is local, when this used to be a 2-paper town, then it was a 1-paper town, now it's like a half-a-paper town. Like that, I think, also undermines.
La Gazette is going to be mad at you for that characterization.
They-
But go ahead.
3/4 of a paper town. I mean, Pat's column and the Times. I mean, this is, I think it's a problem for how folks, to your point, get informed about local issues, because the Washington Post isn't covering the county commission or the city council race. That's your local paper.
I don't think that we have too big of a problem here in the Tampa Bay region. We are the largest media market in the state, so there's still a lot of coverage happening here. Are the Times having financial problems? Of course. They layoff after layoff after layoff, cutback after cutback after cutback, of course. But the problems exist more so in areas that are more rural, that don't have huge populations, and you find yourself in a news desert in that situation. So here in the Tampa Bay area, we have journalists that are doing really great work, not just with the Times, but with there's the St. Pete Catalyst that does a lot of work. You mentioned La Gazeta; they're doing a lot of work, and are they as big as the Times? No, of course not. But the Tampa Bay Rays, big news of the month right there, with everything that's been going on with the stadium deal and the bond resolutions with St. Pete and Pinellas County. The coverage of that from the Times reporters has been wall to wall. It's been very thorough. You still see a lot of reporting that is, uncovering things that people in power might not want uncovered.
Let me ask you a question. When you've done some stuff on the Rays,
Yeah.
Do you actually physically go to any of those meetings, or do you just watch them on TV?
Oh, no, I don't go to... I spend most of my time in yoga pants. I don't go in public anymore. Who goes in public anymore?
the reason
You're lucky
I'm
sitting right here.
Yeah,
I was there yesterday.
The reason you were where?
I was at city council yesterday.
Were you?
Yes, I was.
Across the bay?
No, not across
in
the bay.
Tampa.
Oof. God, what?
No,
Exactly.
the reason I ask
Nobody
is...
wants to cross that bridge.
The reason I ask
bay?
is I was just wondering if there's physical bodies, and Jason, I guess that goes to what you said. Are there other people other than you and Joe Citro who are...
Do not lump me in a sentence with that cretin.
Okay.
Oh, poor Joe.
No.
No,
but
none of us
anyway,
feel bad for him.
well, are there actually other people there, watching, other journalists, any other
Very
journalists?
few. And I mean, I would say to Janelle's point, I think part of the problem, I think it's excellent that we do have, to your point, and I don't want to undermine that, really genuinely good reporters out there who are working really hard. At the same time, there's nobody at county commission or city council right now for Tampa Bay Times on a consistent basis.
Only
and
if there's like a big top ticket
and
item.
I think that's kind of a problem, right? When we talk about the value of local news and people staying informed about the local issues that we all agree at this table are so imperative to like your everyday life, if no one's actually covering the bodies of government that are actually making those decisions that affect your everyday life, that's a bit of a problem,
but
a disconnect.
them not physically being there doesn't mean that they're not covering it. And I'm going to push back just a little bit because there is a lot of, I don't physically go to these meetings because they are massive time sucks.
Yep.
So the
Agreed.
vast majority of things that are done at these local government meetings, there's a ton of public comment where you have people, I won't name names of all the gadflies, there are so many of them, and they get up there and they talk about stuff and you're like, oh, what's he smoking and where do I find it?
My house.
So like, you know, a lot of the more important work happens before these meetings even occur. Like most of us had a pretty good idea of what was going to happen in that Pinellas County Commission vote last week before it ever even happened. Like the writing was on the wall, phone calls were made, people talk. So you're finding out that stuff ahead of time. And why would you wait to report it until the meeting happens when you've already learned about it? There are public records requests that can be done, you know, anonymous sources.
And that's
not
good.
just
And
people.
that's good reporting. My wife was a TV reporter for 20 plus years, including locally here with TVT and Channel 10, and she covered City Hall, and she said that when you just hang out physically in the building, in the meetings, that sort of thing, and you develop a relationship with those staff people, then you find out about these other issues that, you know, that are important and, you know, and that are coming down the pike long before, you know, anybody else realizes it. And I
Absolutely.
think that that's probably because it's all televised, because it's easier to access, that sort of thing, and we're all virtual. I think that from a reporting perspective, I think that's missing out a little bit.
So absolutely,
prospecting, I think she calls it, right?
100%. And if you are somebody who has not already established those relationships and built that Rolodex, you better have your butt in that building. Absolutely, 100%. But
you were the communications director over in St. Petersburg for more than a year.
And there were plenty of reporters who, on city council days, you know, hung around, and you know, they would request the mayor's calendar, for example, and show up where they knew he was going to be. And these are all, you know, tricks of the trade that I used to employ as well. But once you're
What did you do when you heard somebody was poking around on a particular issue? Just generically, I'm not saying.
Sure.
You know, did you try? Because it looks to me like the gentleman over here in Tampa who has that job does a very quick job of trying to stamp out fires, you know, very rapidly and sort of take over, you know, those issues and those stories before they break.
I tried to operate a little differently than I think some people do when they work in as a political appointee. You know, obviously your job as a political appointee is to make sure that your boss looks good and to get positive information out. And when something negative is floating around out there, it's your job to try to mitigate that to the extent possible, or bury it if possible, or spin it if you have to, whatever. So, I mean, obviously that's a part of the job, but the best way to make your boss look good is to make sure that you don't have an adversarial relationship with the press. And I worked very hard, especially because these were people that I knew from being a reporter myself. You know, I worked very hard to have a good relationship with them so that if something popped up and they were like, hey, I heard this thing about Mayor Welch, you know, what's going on? Like, I would be able to have an off the record conversation with them and say, like, do we really think this is news? Like, let's talk about what's going on. Or, you know, give me a week, you know, and I'm gonna give you a scoop on this thing, but we're not done on this, and there's a reason, there's a strategy, and if this gets reported right now, it's gonna hurt our residents. Things like that you kind of appeal to these people as friends and colleagues, not adversaries, and that doesn't always work, you know. And sometimes people like me, it's BS.
Well, maybe no, but yeah, no, you're right, because maybe you can dig out a little more truth truth,
Exactly.
and a little more facts.
And the vast majority of reporters are not they're not gotcha, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like some of them are, but the vast majority, they just want to get the information out to the public. They want to get the story. And, if you work with them and you explain to them why, it would be beneficial for everybody involved to just wait a day or two, usually they're amenable to that. So that was how I approached my position. I'm not in that position anymore. So
speaking of gotcha, Jason, probably before you came to Tampa, but Dan Ruth, Dan Ruth?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, anyway, I love Dan Ruth, but he loved a good story like that.
Yeah.
Especially as a columnist.
Yeah.
And he would just beat people to death with juicy stories. We'll have to have Dan Ruth on if he's still in the.
He used to host a show here.
Did he?
Yeah.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about something substantive. This has been, actually, we could talk a whole hour just about this sort of esoteric stuff, but
Truth.
But let's talk about the Rays. You did
Sure.
a nice story on the Rays. I don't think that's necessarily a done deal, and your story seems to indicate that in regard to now it's, the commission voted, the city council voted in Pinellas, and now it's back in the Rays court.
I think I said something to the effect of it is not dead, but it might be on life support. I think what the Pinellas County Commission did was probably smart. The biggest issue here is, at this particular juncture, is the land development rights. So we're not just talking about a stadium development. We're talking about the historic gas plant district that is this massive 60-plus acre prime land near downtown St. Pete.
And now it's super prime because
Exactly.
Central Avenue has developed so nicely.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Downtown has really kind of spilled all the way to 9th Street or all the way to 16th Street at this point. It used to be called the Edge District, but it's
Right.
not really the Edge anymore. It's kind of just melded into downtown. So this is prime real estate. So getting that development in a way that honors the community that was displaced when the stadium was first built in the late 80s into the early 90s is really important to this particular Mayor Welch's administration. So, part of that,
they got it at a tremendous discount in the contract.
And part of the deal is that if the city or the county were responsible for not holding up their end of the contract, which was approved by both the county and the city in July, if they don't meet the terms of those conditions, then the Rays get to maintain some of those land development rights. That's a very lucrative deal for them. But if the Rays are the ones who back out of the contract or who are in breach of contract for whatever reason, the city and the county retain those development rights and the Rays lose out. So you had kind of a game of chicken and mouse here, where chicken and mouse. That's
I'm
not
going to
a
say chicken
saying.
and
Cat and
mouse.
mouse.
Cat and mouse.
I think it's
chicken.
a game of chicken.
I feel like the chicken and the mouse, they're just
I'm
running
cleansing.
aimlessly.
I don't know. Can you still hear me? I just
we
lost
can
my
hear you.
headphones.
We have chickens in my front yard, and my dog goes crazy about them, by the way.
Okay.
Shout out to Stella.
All right, well, I apologize for
to your
mixing metaphors here, but anyways, there was a game of chicken of like who's going to be the one who backs out, and by voting. Finally, after two canceled votes, by voting to approve the bond resolution, the county basically kicked it back to the Rays and said, we've upheld our end of the bargain. Now it's your turn. The concern is that they have expressed is that they expect that there's going to be significant cost overruns because they expect that this is going to be delayed to 2029 instead of 2028, and that they're not prepared to absorb those cost overruns.
They being the Rays.
Yes. And they are the Rays are contractually obligated to cover any cost overruns. So the question now becomes, well, if you guys think there's going to be cost overruns and you're not prepared to absorb those, are you going to have to back out of the contract? But if they do, the city and the county are covered at this point. So that's why I say that it was probably a smart vote. And that's what Chris Latvala's rationale was for switching his position.
I wanted to bring up Mr. Latvala because I find it interesting that I kind of wonder to some extent if the relationship between the Rays and the county, maybe it's not poisoned, but it's not healthy at the current state. When you have a county commissioner,
think it's been healthy for a long time.
Truth, but when a county commissioner openly says, like, I think the owner should sell the team. I think the team, the community deserves better. I think you should sell. I mean, I think that's kind of indicative, right, of that relationship being strained at best.
Yeah, and it was really kind of it was very on brand for not just Chris Latvala, but the Latvala family in general. They are very good at sort of playing politics, if you will, and kind of scaring people into submission. So by wielding that cudgel over Stuart Sternberg's head and painting him as an adversary to Pinellas County, he really kind of put himself in the power position for ongoing negotiations throughout this process. And I think that that's probably exactly what he was intending to do, was draw that into the public
I mean, it doesn't
eye
seem
and
unwise. I mean, you can tell me, you know certainly St. Pete better than I, but I would imagine Sternberg's probably the least popular man throughout the entirety of this process, elected officials included.
Most people don't care. There is a very loud, vocal group of people, conservatives, and there's strange bedfellows here. You've got conservatives and Democrats that are like, this is corporate welfare. What are we doing? And they're very loud, but there's not a lot of them. And the people who are listening to the show that are among them probably would disagree, but it is a fact. They are not a large group, and the vast majority of people in the city, if they're paying attention, it is so far down the list of important things in their life right now that they're just like, Stu Sternberg, who? I don't care.
Yeah. Speaking of people who are listening, let's try and get them to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, please.
You can call in at 813-239-9663. Or you can email us at dj@wmnf.org.
Is Stu Sternberg, if you're listening, call in.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely going to do that.
I met Matt Silverman, who is a co-president.
Co-president with Brian Aldo.
Brian Aldo. I met Matt Silverman when he was a young man, the first month that he arrived in Tampa on the tails of Stuart.
I thought you meant young man, like you knew him as a toddler, but okay, that works.
He was he was almost a toddler. He was on the tails of Stuart when they first bought the team. And actually, I like Matt a lot. He looks like he's aged a lot in the last 15 years they've been here.
This stadium debacle has been going on for a very, very long time.
So give us the future. So I know I pulled up the Times article. So the new deadline, I guess, whether artificially or real, is March 31st to figure out, I guess, the next leg of this. Where do you see the future of this developing now, having the county commission absolve themselves of their responsibility, at least as you mentioned at this juncture?
It'll go quiet through the holidays and into the new year, I'm sure. The thing to watch now, I think, is going to be the issue of the cost overruns with the raise. How are they going to bridge that?
My point is, and if I was sitting there, I'd say, okay, we satisfied our side of the deal. A contract's a contract. If they want to continue to be over there, then why would the city or the county even think about more negotiations? I mean, I think that's political suicide.
Yes.
To go back to the table.
Yes. Mayor Welch made it very clear that if there was any additional negotiation on this deal, the city is not coming to the table with a penny more than what they have already pledged.
Good.
So he's already made that clear. Now, I mean,
and is he a tough guy? Does he hold to his words like that?
Oh, you have no idea.
Yeah.
And what now? The city and county is it says $600 million against the $1.3 billion, if I'm not mistaken.
Something like that.
Yeah, because the city has $200 and something million for the stadium, and then another chunk of change for the historic gas plant. So yeah, there's so
it's not a small.
Hey, let's
amount
hear
of
what Justin in St. Pete has to say. Good morning, Justin.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How you? What do you have to say about all this?
Well, I think that having a baseball team is really unique and valuable. I agree with what was said about it being a strange bedfellows for who is really against it, but it creates a lot of jobs down there. I don't think everybody can appreciate that. The only thing I wish is that we had a train that would get us there. But no, I think that they should keep it. I think that it's a great thing. I lived in Chicago for a little bit, bartended up there. The amount of money that it generates is just really, it's got a lot of social capital, if you will, to have a baseball team in St. Pete, and I hope they keep them.
All right, we appreciate the call. To the contrary, I've said pretty consistently the last couple of shows we've talked about it. It's I think baseball is a dying sport. I think that the Rays have never really wanted to be in St. Petersburg. I think they've clearly shown that they'd prefer to be in Hillsborough County if given the chance. And yes, you make a good point about, some employment. There's a lot of part-time employment over there that I'm sure a lot of people appreciate, and I don't mean to poo-poo that. But on the whole, $1 billion, if I was there voting, I'd probably say no. But anyway.
I don't have a dog in the fight.
I mean, I'll say, for whatever it's worth, we had this conversation just a couple of weeks ago. I think if things were to fall apart in St. Petersburg, I think Hillsborough County might be a more amenable partner to this than I think people might think. I'm
not if it requires taxpayer funding. So the memory in Hillsborough County is long about Raymond James.
Truth.
And there is not an appetite to have a taxpayer-funded stadium in this city.
Especially with a more conservative, county commission,
I think that county commission's far more malleable than people think,
including some of your good buddies.
Oh yes, some very good friends of mine.
No to everything,
like oxygen and rainbows.
I think
and puppies.
I think 2 years ago.
What have I walked into?
Yeah, I think 2 years ago, this county commission in Hillsborough might have considered it. But I think this current county commission, there's no way, and I would agree with you, Janelle.
I think there is a pathway to votes, but I do think, to Janelle's point, I think the tax aversion is real, and I'm not sure how you would circle that square.
Ken Hagan is Daryl Shaw. They're the people to ask about Hillsborough County because
100%.
They've been in the room, they've been in negotiations.
But you can't ask Ken because Ken really wants it. Ken would do it.
Well, you have to understand.
Ken, if you're listening, I keep asking you to come on the show.
Mayor Welch, he is a product of the gas plant. So this is not just a city project for him. This is not just a legacy project for him. This is personal because he grew up in that. He has memories of his family owning a business that was shuttered because of that. His own father was on St. Pete City Council when this original deal to build Tropicana Field was being hashed out, and his dad
the gas plant area was kind of like our Central Avenue. It was a vibrant African American area,
and they were promised the sky and then some. Free ice cream for lunch every day, and it didn't pan out. And Ken Welch's dad kind of got he bought into the promises and then got, for lack of better terms, a little bit screwed over. So Ken wants to make this right. So I mean, it means a lot to him, and like I said, it's in the Rays' court at this point. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right, Jack in Tampa, what do you have to say?
Hey, a question for you, and I don't know a whole lot about the history behind this, but I kind of question, like a financial question. Has anybody done, I'll just ask the question and then you can answer it offline. Has anybody done a financial analysis of both from the city and the county's individual perspectives in terms of kind of money out, money into their coffers in terms of financial return? Forgetting all the synergies and, making everybody happy. But if you just look at the income statement, the balance sheet of the city and the county, has anybody done a financial analysis to show, is there payback? Does the $600 million or whatever it is ever come back?
I believe some of that money's coming from tourist tax. And I know, John, you made a very good point that I don't think you're the only one to have made, that for a lot of the folks in St. Pete, I imagine there's a lot of concern of if you're funding this with tourist tax and the beaches are destroyed and less folks are coming to participate in being a tourist in your community.
Is that money still going to come?
Yeah.
So
100%.
And I don't know, did you interview that lady at University of Tampa, the professor, or did somebody else interview her? Must have been somebody.
Susan McManus?
No, at the University of Tampa, there's an economics professor.
Oh, UT, okay.
Who was interviewed, I think, by WSF.
No, that was not me.
It was, and it was a really, really good interview, and I urge everybody to try and find it. I wish I knew the woman's name, but she said basically that there's a lot of assumptions in all the economic analysis that she thinks is BS, and she and many other professors who've studied sports stadiums around the country, I think, have concluded that it's not a win for, by any means. There's no return on investment for local government.
The Rays have done their own, but take that with a grain of salt, right? And then, nationwide, there are any number of studies, and they're all done by people who say that these deals are bad for taxpayers. And so you have critics of this deal who often point to a lot of those types of studies to say that, it's been proven over and over again that there is not a return on investment. I will say to those, and you can take this, however you want to take it, because again, I have no dog in this fight. I literally could not care less about this
Why are
issue.
we fighting dogs?
Yeah, that's terrible. That's one of those euphemisms. I hate that. And kill two
We went
birds
from
with one
chickens
stone.
to dogs.
Chickens and cats to dogs.
I gotta stop with the cliches. Anyway, so what those studies don't take into account are intangibles. So the opportunity to have your city showcased on national television when these games are broadcast nationally, the draw that it has. People may not necessarily come here specifically for one game or another, but there is some tourism where people come because they're playing the Braves or they're playing the Yanks.
I totally think it's that boosterism.
Yeah.
And it's been going on forever. Whether or not it was the Red Sox used to train in Tampa, which was a big deal, and we had the big red machine, and people around the country and in the Midwest and in Ohio would go, oh yeah, we're going to go down to Tampa, and watch spring training and Pete Rose and all that. That's been going on for 50, 60 years.
People also don't talk about how this is sort of. You hear a lot of people make the argument that the city could capitalize on that land much more effectively if they were to parcel it out and have it developed. The problem with that, and as somebody who worked in city government, I can attest to this. The problem with that is that in order to have a cohesive district that's live, work, play, that sort of thing, a city should never be a developer, first of all. Second of all,
amen. Amen is all I got to say.
If you are parsing it out to developers on a land by land basis, becomes very difficult to stipulate what that district needs to look like. So it could potentially become disjointed. So the thought process is, in order to make sure that this district works the way that it's intended to work, it needs to be developed by one developer who has entered into an agreement to do things a certain way.
And I'll give you two examples on the Tampa side of the bay. Is you've got Armature Works, which does work because it's a single developer who has a plan. The city helped in regard to making it a CRA and everything that goes with the Community Redevelopment Agency area, and also at Water Street. I'm not sure if Water Street became a CRA. I don't think it
Channel
did.
Side is within, Water Street would be within the Channel Side CRA.
Channel Side started, but then Water Street came on with Vinnick and Bill Gates and his company. And like you said, Janelle, and you make a good point, that there's a very cohesive vision in the Water Street area, probably much more so than Channel Side, because Channel Side developed property by property.
Yeah, that's probably I would agree
Water
with that
Street
sentiment.
developed as a 20-block area, and it's still developing.
And remember that Channel Side was kind of a bust. So
Sort of, yeah. I mean, it was kind of start and stop.
Exactly.
And when I first moved here, it was like NY Precinct Pizza. And like, it was not much.
Listen, I'm going to give credit to Linda Salcena because she had the vision for Channel Side. Unfortunately, various mayors didn't really continue that vision because Channel Side was a CRA. All right, Simon has been very patient
very
in
patient.
Lakeland, and we appreciate you.
Simon.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Simon.
Janelle, long time.
Yeah, I remember you, Simon.
I remember you too, Janelle.
Uh-oh.
Okay, some of the verbiage: taxpayer handout, balance sheet, return on investment, cash for taxpayers. With that in mind, as journalists sitting there, could you explain to the public why the federal government should subsidize NPR?
The federal government does not subsidize NPR.
Well, they give them hundreds of millions of dollars.
They do
They
not.
do not.
Through the broadcast corporation.
They do not give them hundreds of millions of
NPR
dollars.
derives their funding from member stations such as WMNF and WUSF, and those stations sometimes get small stipends from the CP.
I know what you're talking about.
Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank
CPB.
you.
Yeah, the corporation through broadcast. But they do get hundreds of millions.
They do not.
They
that you're saying that's a fact then?
I'm not here to assert any opinions on what the federal government should or should not
We'll get
be funding.
we'll get Randy to come down the hall and talk to it.
But I will tell you that this goes hand in hand with the concept of funding for arts programming. And you just, to some people there is value in that, and to others there isn't value, and that's why we have elections, and that's why people elect who they elect to implement these sorts of priorities. So, I think we have an incoming administration here who feels as though they have a mandate to do these types of things, and we'll see what happens with that. What you need to watch for, though, is what happens as a result, and whether or not people are happy with what they got, or if they have buyer's remorse. And that's what ultimately tells the tale. But to ask me to explain why we should fund NPR or any other public broadcasting, that's not for me to say.
All right, we're going to jump topics and
let's go
switch gears. So let's talk about Democratic politics in Hillsborough County. I thought, Janelle, you did an excellent job with the Susan Valdez story. You want to recap that a little bit?
Yeah, so Susan Valdez earlier this month.
Who is Susan Valdez?
Sorry, I just assume that people listening know these things. I'm giving your listeners a lot of credit. She's a state representative who represents parts of Tampa and
Started
Hillsborough
on
County.
the Hillsborough County School Board
Exactly,
for 8 years.
exactly. She was a Democrat, and she announced earlier this month that she was changing her party affiliation to become a Republican.
Right after.
Hold on, I'll get to that in a second. Her rationale was that serving from the super minority in the legislature made it so that she wasn't able to bring back progress for her constituency. She also complained that leadership within the Democratic caucus, which is increasingly small these days, was not supportive of her and that she was not being heard. However, there are a lot of people who found that disingenuous because right before she switched parties, she was running to chair the Hillsborough County Democratic Party. She lost that race to Vanessa Lester, who is now the chair of the Hillsborough County Democratic Party, succeeding
by a considerable margin, 120 to 77.
Exactly. So there's a question of, and I'm not saying that this is what was in Susan's mind and heart, but there is a large contingent of people who think that she was just a little bit pee-pee panties without losing.
Sour grapes come to mind.
Yeah. And I think it also doesn't help that her district in the last 4 years has had like a 19-point swing. That district went from...
It went for Trump.
Yeah.
Her district went for Trump in 2024.
That was a district that used to be...
Why would she care about her district anymore? Because this is her last 2 years in the district as the state representative.
I think the perception is that she's been promised connections to enable her to pursue a political career going forward locally.
And look what happened. What did the Republicans do for her when she got there a week later?
Exactly. Right after she switched parties, she was named vice chair of the House Budget Committee, which is formerly known as the Appropriations Committee, which is arguably the most powerful committee. So she's number 2 of the most powerful committee in the House.
Yeah, that's quite a little...
Where she would assuredly not have been had she have remained a Democrat.
No
they
Democrat.
would have put her in the closet committee where she can legislate from like a closet.
No Democrat has a chairmanship or a vice chairmanship of any committee in the House. In the Senate they do, but not in the House.
It's a plum thing. If Susan's listening, which I doubt she is, we did invite her to come on the show today, actually, and I didn't hear back from her. Susan, you are still my friend, personally, disappointed politically. But anyway, we do have Layla on the line very patiently. Let's see. She might want to be talking about the raise. Good morning.
Yes, I hope that things work out with the raise. As a citizen of Hillsborough County, the reference to the public speaking at the county commission, the people being gadflies, I guess David Henry Thoreau in Civilized Disobedience would disagree with you. We are public taxpayers that pay a lot of money that have that only venue to speak our minds.
Good for you.
So, ma'am, I am not referring to the vast majority of people who show up at these meetings to speak, who come there to speak. They are gadflies. You have people who come in and they have their entire vehicles covered in bumper stickers with conspiracy theories written all over them, and they come and they talk about things that A, don't make sense, and B, have no relevance to any business before the county whatsoever.
As a broad stroke for our public people that come in and take their time out of their day to speak on an issue that's important to them.
I'm only talking about people who show up at every single meeting and talk about things that have no relevance to any
City
business.
Council has Tony Daniels, for example.
Yeah, what we tried to
Tampa
do
City Council.
What we tried to do at Tampa City Council, we say, we'll put you at the front of the meeting if you have something that's on the agenda. And if you don't have something that's on the agenda, we'll still give you your 2 or 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
But we'll put it at the back of the agenda. It never worked. It really never worked. But anyway, Layla, we're not minimizing you and the good people who come down to County Commissioner City Hall to speak your mind.
The fact that the reporter is not in-house concerns me, and the fact that the condescension of the conversation, so much that I've heard this morning, for our taxpayers that are in the loop of all of these issues we're talking about, does not make sense.
All right. Well, we're glad you're in the loop, and we're glad you listen, and we appreciate you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think candidly, to her point, listen, we appreciate the fact that, God, I'm glad anybody cares about these local, places of government, whether it be city council or county commission, because too often we have too few people showing up.
Exactly.
The issue is
people should get involved. They absolutely should. But there are a handful of people that, go to some of these meetings, whether it's Pinellas County Commission, Hillsborough County Commission, Tampa City Council, St. Pete's, whatever. There are just a handful of outliers who come in, and the things that they say don't make any sense. And it's actually kind of sad because some of them clearly maybe have some mental
Tony made
issues.
national news. He made Fox News for demanding reparations before Tampa City Council.
Yeah,
because
had a
Tampa
guy
City
in
Council
St.
has that
Pete
kind of money.
who got up there and told people to go back to Africa. Those are the types of people that I'm talking about. This is a democratic process that's incredibly important, and more people should be involved, not fewer. But there are some troublemakers who slow progress.
So I wanted to go back to this Susan Valdez issue a little bit. Not without precedent, and I can be the history major here. Sandy Merman actually years ago got elected to the Florida House representing Davis Island and other parts of South Tampa, and she immediately jumped to the Republican Party. That was like 20-something years ago. Nobody knows that. So, and she has had a pretty successful career as a Republican. I was wondering, Janelle, what do you think? How well will Susan Valdez be received by Republicans and by the Republican Party? And by the way, there is a rumor that she wants that when she's done with these 2 years, that we'll see her running as a Republican for the Hillsborough County Commission.
100%. The question would be, is it against Terry Cohen, or is she primarying both either a friend of the show, Joshua Wolfstall, or Donna Cameron Cepeda, who are both incompetent and inept?
Oh, okay. Well, I am not here to echo any of that. But whether or not she is well received within the Republican Party is yet to be determined. And here's why. So right now, they love her because they just gave the GOP its largest majority in the House that they have ever had. This is historic. So that's a big deal for them. But what needs to be watched here is, does she vote consistently with Republicans? Because if she does, sure, they'll probably embrace her for a time. She might, when it comes time for her to run for something, if she's running as a Republican, the first thing any Democrat running against her is going to do, and you know this, is they're going to say, yeah, but you used to be a Democrat. And that's going to be used against her as a cudgel.
What is it, a rhino?
And yeah, you must be a rhino. So if she wants any success as a Republican, she's going to have to vote with Republicans. And I just find it hard to believe that somebody who, a couple of weeks ago was, for
running to
women's
be the Democratic
women's
chair.
reproductive rights and all these sort of things that align with the Democratic Party and are just diametrically opposed to the GOP platform. If she toes that line, then sure, the Republican Party will probably mostly accept her. But if she doesn't, she's going to be labeled.
I'll say there was pushback even from local Republicans. Jake Hoffman, who's formerly the president of the Young Republicans here in Hillsborough County, released a social media video excoriating her switch and basically suggesting that she should not be welcome. And I'll say,
give up her seat.
Yeah, and Representative Valdez's statement, I think she basically intimated that she's going to still be Susan, but somehow Susan, who's Republican, how she navigates that is going to be obviously enormously challenging.
Sure.
All right, so the Democrats locally are not the only ones dysfunctional. The Hillsborough County Republican Party treasurer.
Oh, God.
Did you write about that?
I did.
Yeah. What happened?
So now I can't even remember the guy's name, but
Yeah, that's all right.
he was the treasurer, not anymore. He was arrested, accused of basically embezzling funds from the party.
$14,000. That's a lot of money for a local party.
It is a lot of money for a local party. Well, maybe not for the GOP. It's a lot of money for the Democrats. But that's stealing. You're not allowed to do that. That's against the law. So they got to find a new treasurer and maybe clean house a little.
I just needed to throw that in to just say that Democrats aren't the only ones that are dysfunctional. The Hillsborough County Republican Party's been pretty dysfunctional for a couple of years, hasn't it, Jason?
I mean, absolutely. And I think part of the challenge for Vanessa Lester in trying to assume the mantle of leadership is how do you distinguish yourself from multiple series of losing cycles. I mean, 2020, I think Democrats sort of stemmed the tide a little bit here, but 2022 was an absolute bloodbath, and 2024 was the scene where the elevators open in The Shining. So,
well, you know what? And I wanted to bring this up because actually it hasn't been overly reported, but at the local level, our constitutional officers had some changeover. Cindy Stewart, who was elected 4 years ago, lost to Victor Christ in November, and that really that was for Hillsborough County Clerk, which is a huge job. That's the head of probably employs more than 1,000 people down at the courthouse.
And Bob, Coach had a close race for property appraiser. Craig Latimer had a close race for supervisor
and Andrew
elections.
Warren losing to Susie Lopez after having national exposure on all of his Andrew Warren DeSantis issues, loses to Susie Warren.
This is a red
Susie
county
Lopez,
now.
excuse me.
I said this in Cafe Con Tampa this morning. I'm not 100% convinced that any amount of changes to the strategy on the part of Democrats would have changed substantially the outcome of these elections.
I would agree with you.
There's so much finger pointing, and we're probably not going to have time to get to it, but I also, reported recently about, some potential problems with the minority leader in the House, Fentress Driscoll. Everybody's kind of pointing fingers and playing the blame game. Like, how could we have failed this catastrophically? But there are so many different things at play. And when you have a party in power for as long as the Republicans have been in power in Tallahassee, you wind up with this, and this is not necessarily for county commission districts or city council or anything or constitutional offices, but for legislative districts and stuff, they've been drawing the maps. Yep. They're calling the shots, and trying to be able to undo that is very, very difficult when you have been fighting from the minority for so long. The longer you're in the minority, the harder it becomes to get out of it. So, Democrats have a very tall order on their hands, and I think that it's going to take a combination of things for them to make changes. It's something that has nothing to do with them at all, and that is if this incoming Republican presidential administration, the Donald Trump 2.0, if it has the problems that economists think it's going to have in terms of these tariffs that he is proposing, that's going to cause some pretty serious economic problems, and that could make people pretty mad at Republicans. So that could potentially be something that Democrats could capitalize on, even at the local level. But there also needs to be, in my opinion, a fundamental rewriting of the Democratic strategy playbook, because for too long it's been
nationally,
and locally too, these are the issues that you should think are important instead of what are the issues you think are important.
Ding, ding,
and
ding,
that
ding, ding.
Transgender in the bathrooms, that sort of thing.
Exactly. There are a ton of progressive Democrats who don't think that transgender women should be allowed to use women's restrooms. Maybe they think that, they should have, single stall bathrooms where it doesn't matter or whatever. But, and it's not to say that Democrats shouldn't focus on these core issues that are important to their base, but they need to diversify their talking points to better hit on those kitchen table issues that people are really feeling right now. The reason Republicans have been so successful is because they have taken up the mantle of being the party that's going to help your wallet, and Democrats, they are doing those things, but they don't communicate it as effectively.
Yeah. All right, let's see if we can take one or two more calls. You're listening to Down and Dirty with John Dingfelder and Jason Marlowe. Our guest,
Daryl, who's been waiting for a minute here.
What?
We have a caller. We have a caller.
I know. We're
He's
listening. Our guest today, very special guest, is Janelle Irwin Taylor from Florida Politics and Southeast Politics. Daryl, you've been very patient. Good morning. Daryl, are you there? Let's try one more time.
Daryl, you there?
Hello.
Hello.
This is Bill, not Daryl.
Oh.
Hey, very quickly, we're running out of time. What's up?
Okay, real fast. I've known Susan Valdez for over 20 years. I taught at Lato High School. She graduated from Lato. She was an advocate for the parents and the students at that school. She fought for them, and they knew who to go to when they needed help. I knew who to go to when I needed help. She knows my face, but may not remember my name. But regardless of what flag she waves, whether it's Democrat or Republican, she is a good person. She will help, and regardless if she's a Democrat or Republican, people will love her regardless, and that's all I want to say.
Well,
I know.
So that's a really great point, Bill, because I think a lot of people like me forget, because we're so entrenched in the politics of everything, that the vast majority of Americans are not really that political. And they don't necessarily see Republican or Democrat or anything like that. They listen to a person, they look at what's in their heart and what they're promising, and that's what they care about, not necessarily the political affiliation. So you might not be wrong.
That's how I got elected and reelected.
Yeah.
Because especially in South Tampa, there were a lot of Republicans. I knew they were Republicans. They might not have known what I was. They didn't care.
Yep.
They knew that they could call us.
Thanks
All
for
right,
that, Bill.
let's try Daryl. Thanks a lot.
No, it was Bill.
Bill.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it was Bill. And last but not least, DeAndre in Brandon.
Oh, I think I remember you.
You made him sound French.
Hey, it's DeAndre. Yeah, hello. I'm going to try to tie a couple things together.
Real quick.
Very quick.
Yeah, so how is it the media isn't necessarily tying the gas plant district, Central, the McDill Air Force Base, King High School, and some of these great communities together, and then bringing names to the public and like reports, whether it be TV, paper, etc. Because I don't think as much as it's been investigated, I don't think I've heard any names associated with any of the decision making on actually paving over so many people's actual heritage and history.
Okay, so you're talking about like these lost and forgotten, predominantly
Cemeteries,
African American cemeteries. Yes?
Yeah, it seems like death by 1,000 cuts in a very ugly way, and I guess it feels like to go towards progress and some ambition that really just started when my mom was a kid. It happened when she was a child.
So let me
Thank you,
respond
DeAndre.
to that just really briefly. There has been actually a fairly significant amount of work done on these lost and forgotten cemeteries in
I have to
various
shout out to
different locations.
Paul Guzzo.
Exactly.
St. Pete Times.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, Paul left.
Yeah.
Now at USF.
There still needs to be more work. To be clear, I'm not saying that the work is done. The work is not done, but it is ongoing, and there have been grave sites identified at the parts of the historic gas plant district, and there are ongoing mitigation studies to make sure that those graves are preserved or moved in a way that is respectful and in line with family wishes.
If I recall, I actually think, to her credit, I think Fentress Driscoll actually helped put forth
Fentress did a ton with the Hillsborough ones, and there's actually a statewide study.
She deserves some credit for
I
the
missed
heavy
your
lifting on
Fentress
that.
article. What's her future?
What
Complicated.
It's we don't have enough time to get into it. It's so there's some members of her caucus that aren't happy with her. They spoke on condition of anonymity. None of them were named, but there were several. But there were some that came forward who were not speaking on condition of anonymity to support her. So it's kind of it seems like a 50-50 thing here, where some people are frustrated and some folks aren't with her leadership over the minority caucus, thinking that maybe she could have done a little bit better this cycle, and are worried that she kind of used the caucus for her own political gain. She, of course, refutes that, and her supporters also refute that. So,
But I agree with you. These coattails coming from a presidential election like this one and we just had in November are huge. And
there was nothing local Dems were going to be able to do to change the national mood or environment, to Janelle's point. I mean, those numbers were to some extent baked in.
Yeah.
Janelle Irwin Taylor, where can people read you?
Most of my stuff is on floridapolitics.com.
Excellent
We
writer.
also have southeastpolitics.com, which covers politics, basically everything south of Mason-Dixon.
Do people have to pay for Florida politics?
We have no paywalls.
All
No
right.
paywalls.
Well, you're
You can
doing a
read our
great
stuff for
you're
free.
doing a great job. We appreciate it
Very much.
Jason Marlowe. I won't see you for the
Yeah,
holidays.
we wanted to have Joshua Wolfstall on, but we ran out of time.
We'll be here. We will be here. I will be here next
will
week
miss
to
you.
sort of wrap up the year.
I will miss you dearly,
Hopefully with
John.
Patrick Montega
Oh, awesome.
and his crowd.
I'm saying
Janelle, we're
hello
going to
to
have
Pat
you
in
back
a week
because
from
you're so
now.
much fun. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
excellent show. Thank you so
It's
much
fun,
for
guys.
driving
Thanks for
across the
having
bay
me.
for us.
Yeah.
All right, this is John Dingfelder, Down and Dirty. If we don't talk to you, have a wonderful holiday and a great New Year's, and don't forget to celebrate my birthday.
Yeah, we won't.